on. We have some exciting panelists with some super pros on it. So welcome. The agenda today is to introduce these panelists, talk about, roughly set the stage, what is phase 3. Probably most of you already have a phase 2, and that's why you're here. But we'll just set the stage a bit. We'll get into people's personal stories from both industry and also from the government side. And then we're going to break into a panel discussion, and then we'll open up to Q&A. If you're an attendee, you must be muted. And so if you want to ask questions, we ask that you do so in the chat and then in the Q&A. And a recording of today's webinar will be emailed to everybody after the webinar. I'm going to turn over the introduction of UMLRI to our Executive Director, Matt McSwain.
Thank you very much, Stacy, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and a special thank you to the panelists that are with us today to share their insights and wisdom and sage advice for getting to phase 3. I am Matt McSwain, Executive Director of the UMass Lowell Research Institute. We are a 501c3 under the Applied Research Corporation for UMass Lowell. Established last summer. So we are New England's newest emerging technology hub for the Department of Defense. We are a 19,000 square foot facility out the back gate, about a quarter of a mile out the back gate of Hanscom Air Force Base, where we have a service neutral ecosystem and an aerospace and defense academia industry government neutral ecosystem to create community, spark innovation, and stimulate your business growth. And today's panel is about getting you to phase 3. Next slide, please. UMass Lowell overall, we provide an incubation, integration, manufacturing, education throughout the life cycle of the life cycle management acquisition system. And you can see the Northstar campus that you'll hear more about throughout the presentation. Located in Lincoln is the Technology Enabler Division of UMass Lowell Research Institute, where Stacy and her team provide expert advice, technical and business assistance for those wishing to enter into commercialization, as well as the Department of Defense ecosystem. Stacy, I'll turn this back over to you.
Okay, now the human introduction. So I'm Stacy. I'm the director. I run an SBIR center here at the Northstar campus. We're also going to hear from my colleague, Stefan Nadeau. He is our Chief Technology Officer, and Stefan has a unique experience on, I'll let him introduce himself, and the unique experience he's going to bring forward. And Cheryl DeLuca from Hanscom. We got Jeff Emmons from the Small Business Office, and we have 2 phase 3 winners with us tonight. Bill Robinson from Frontier Technology and Alex Brickner from Simplesense. So can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Sorry, you dropped out. You said me?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Stefan Nadeau. I've been at Hanscom since 98 and have been involved and had the privilege to be in a number of different roles, ranging from FFRDCs to industry to most recently as a consultant for the last few years as well. So my experience background has been in technologies, both leading edge technologies in addition to non-traditional contracts. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
And Cheryl, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you, Stacy. My name is Cheryl DeLuca, and I'm serving as the Director of Contracting with UMLRI. I've been on board pretty much almost since their inception, probably a couple of years now, and I bring over really 38 years of government Army civilian experience. For the last 25 years of my career, I was the Director of Contracting at Natick R&D Center, or Soldier Systems Center now. We operated pretty much everything that functions as the soldier as a system, cradle to grave operation and contracting, from R&D to fielding and production. And I am excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to everybody's input and the questions at the end. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Cheryl. Jeff, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Jeff Emmons. I'm the Director of Small Business Programs at Hanscom Air Force Base. Brief background on me. This is my third assignment at Hanscom. I had 2 assignments as military, and this is my first assignment as a civilian. In between that period, I was a small business principal and director of contracting, and that before I came back to the Air Force. Who we are and who we support. We are part of the Air Force Material Command's Office of Small Businesses. We're a 2-person office, Ellen McDonald and myself. We support all the program executive officer directorates at Hanscom Air Force Base, and there's 7 operating locations. These include the digital C3INN and the nuclear command and control directorates. We also support the strategic services on base, which are responsible for advisory assistance services, plus the MIT Lincoln Labs contract, MITRE, and Carnegie Mellon. In past year, FY20, these 3 directorates and the AZS office, Strategic Services, obligated over $1 billion directly to small business. Our mission, my mission is maximize opportunities here for small businesses, whether as prime or subcontractors, and one of those being the SBIR program. We're here for the reason everybody else is here, is to support the war fighters out there. And if you'd like to contact me, there's my contact information and email address. Back to you, Stacy.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And next, Alex, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Stacy. My name is Alex Brickner, and I am the co-founder at a company called Simplesense. And so we really got started through the Mass Challenge ecosystem. They helped us out with a couple of phase 1s. And through support of that program, we were able to win a couple phase 2s and then move on to another transaction agreement with the Air Force Civil Engineering Center to deploy capability to integrate mission support systems. And I'm here just to help other startups or people interested in entering this defense space because it is a really big and confusing space, but there is a ton of opportunity and you get to work on a lot of cool problems. So I'm just here as a reference and to support. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll hear more about that journey in just a bit, about what Simplesense does and how you move so quickly to a phase 3. And then on the other side of the coin, Bill Robinson, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Stacy, and welcome everyone. I'm Bill Robinson with Frontier Technology. FTI has been in the SBIR business for the last 35 years, practically since the inception of the SBIR program. We've been responding to SBIR requests from the government, a number of different federal agencies, and have been able to use some of those SBIR technologies today to help the government make some data-driven decisions. Obviously today, a lot of organizations struggle to understand their data and what to do with all that data. And we believe the SBIR technologies that we've developed over the years now serves as a catalyst for our contracting solutions to help their government, specifically in cost, schedule, and performance, but in a number of other areas. We've been, as Stacy mentioned, we've kind of survived the valley of death and understood and are able to market our capabilities now. The company's been very successful. We've really been blessed with the having over 38 SBIR phase 3 contracts that range in a variety of different sizes, come in different shapes, whether it's an IDIQ or a basic ordering agreement or just a direct award to help a particular government customer. Specifically the war fighters today, help them get to understand their data a little bit better.
That's perfect, Bill. So I'm hoping the audience is sort of getting it. We have this company that's new to phase 3, got there very quickly. You have Frontier, which is has 38 phase 3s. And then of course, Jeff from the Small Business Office, who also has great contracting expertise. So, and then I actually did a phase 3 myself. I had funding from Homeland Security and commercialized nuclear detectors from that, but never sold to the government. So I have a slightly different experience with it as well. But let's, I'm gonna just take a moment just to get the audience on the same page quickly to just, I think all of you have SBIRs, but just so you know, like we're talking about small business innovation research grants. As you know, they're non-dilutive grants for technical development. And really what the program is for is seeding technology that is too early stage for other forms of investment. And an STTR is the same program, but in that mode, you are partnered typically with the university, to put it simply. It stands for tech transfer. And the whole thing is administered by the SBA, but they don't issue grants, but they do administer the program. There are 11 participating agencies. This graphic shows in green the ones that also do STTRs. The ones that do STTRs just have big enough budgets that they're required to do STTRs. The bulk, almost half of SBIRs and are issued by the Department of Defense, particularly if you include Department of Defense and NASA. And then another huge chunk comes from NIH. It's a 3-phase program. So in phase 1, as you know, you're doing maybe a paper study, proof of concept. And then in phase 2, you take that proof of concept and you get the TRL level up and you try to get some customer interest. Phase 3 is really a concept. It's like, okay, the Small Business Administration wants to know, did you commercialize anything? And really what this is about is Congress wants to know, did you commercialize from this funding? And actually, I'll show you in the next graphic, I think like half of the companies do. So a phase 3 means commercialization. It can result from any stage of SBIR, even 1. You can go from 1 to 3. The neat thing about phase 3 when it comes to federal sales, and that's going to be a big focus of this webinar, is selling to the federal government. And mostly what we mean there is the DoD, is that you now have a sole source contract, because that SBIR award, particularly with the DoD, also Homeland Security, NASA, it's a contract, and it's already considered competitively bid. So it's just really important thing to know. Highlighted something there. Yes, there's no SBIR, STTR funding. Phase 3. What defines a phase 3? And you see these quotes up here that from the law, that says it's work that derives from, extends or completes a previous SBIR. And people can even reach back like 10, I've even heard 15 years to old SBIRs and say, I'm going to complete it now. You get to own the data rights. They try to stick to SBIR law and really keep it all within the company. Stefan has alerted me to this excellent booklet. The link is down here and we can send it in the email, this phase 3 booklet from the Air Force that goes into more of the details. You can phase 3 as a subcontractor. So say say Lockheed Martin wants to incorporate your stuff. It's still a phase 3 if you're incorporating on a DoD contract. And commercial sales, like what I did, are also phase 3. And this pie chart, so here I found there's been some studies that the agencies actually have to really call people up and chase them down to figure out who actually transitions, because some transition commercially, some transition DoD, some do both. And this is a fun chart that just shows, what their rate of return was. And in the pie chart, well, first of all, I think it's interesting that the phase 3 transition rate was above 50% for all of these 3 agencies that had very detailed studies done. And if you think about if you take like 100% of the phase 1 winners, 50% make it to phase 2, somewhere between 40 and 50%. And if you look at this, somewhere between 53 and 68% make it to phase 3. So if you add that up, like a quarter of all the businesses make it all the way. If you win a phase 1, your chance of getting to commercialization is pretty high. It's not 1 in 10, it's 1 in 4. I thought that was interesting. I just want to keep moving here and get to the fun part, which is the panelists, and let them tell you. So the question is now, how? Okay, you know you want to do it. You know you want to commercialize. How do you get there? And again, the focus today is going to be sort of how do you get there with the federal government? How do you sell back your technology to the federal government? Because it is interesting how they will invest in your technology and then buy it from you, and you keep the data rights. So with that, we'll return it to Alex at Simplesense and let him just share a little more detail about the story about how they went from starting a company to 18 months later having a phase 3.
Thanks so much, Stacy. I really appreciate it. We probably have a somewhat different perspective than most other people in this ecosystem because we came from the private sector. And actually working in government was a last resort option for us. We didn't proactively seek out government contracts, but we were initially involved developing occupancy sensors for retailers so brands could know where people were standing at within a store to see how effective their marketing was, but found that the government was actually more hungry for data than the retailers were. So went through a bunch of SOCOM innovation programs, found that the government was really hungry for capability and for new vendors. And so we thought that this defense market might be a good option to pursue. So we applied to Mass Challenge in 2019. Mass Challenge accepted us and was really helpful in getting us up to speed on the expectations of the defense market, because it really is a different experience than a typical B2B or B2C sales process that you see in the startup world. There's a lot of paperwork involved. It's more about coalition building. And so that was a really big learning opportunity for us. During our phase 1, we really spent our time mapping out the ecosystem, understanding just what problem are we trying to solve, interviewing lots of different stakeholders around the ecosystem, stack ranking different prioritized problems that they had listed, and then making a determination based off our interviews that, hey, we really want to solve this emergency communications data interoperability, because when we interviewed 100 different people, this was their top priority. Okay, so now that we've identified the problem, who are the specific stakeholders on a military base that we would have to partner with in order to make that data accessible to end users? Because we had no idea how the military was actually structured to consume this emergency services information. So fortunately, I was able to get an introduction to a fire chief at Wright-Patterson, and we were just nerding out about emergency communication information sharing. And he invited me on to the base to meet the Operations Support Squadron. I was like, sure, I thought it'd be a casual meet and greet, and I'd have the opportunity to individually interview stakeholders, understand what they did and how our data fit into their workflow. And so I got to Wright-Patterson, and this was my first time ever on a military base. And Chief King sits me in front of the Operational Support Squadron and said, "Go, Alex, pitch us your technology." So I had no idea at all who was doing what or how to present the technology. But I got up on the stage, presented some of the work that we were doing, and they tore us apart. They said, "Well, what you're doing is total crap. We don't want that. We really want this thing." And I was like, okay, well, we can do that thing. We can integrate into these systems. We'll do that instead of what we were proposing. And they were just, I think, somewhat shocked that someone was listening to them and wanted to solve their problem. So we went back. I got another call from Chief King. He's like, "Well, hey, I think we got you pretty far along in the SBIR MOU approval process. Do you want to come back and pitch the base?" And I was like, sure. So the second time ever on a military base with only slightly more knowledge of how the Air Force works, I got in front of the mission operations group, so like the wing commander, and was presenting him some background on the problem. And fortunately, even though I really didn't know what I was doing, the wing commander definitely saw value in solving the problem. And so they signed off on the SBIR phase 3. But through that process, we really identified a lot of different command and control platform vendors that were hungry for a new capability because the Air Force had procured these systems in silos and had somewhat underinvested in them. And so the Fire Alarm Communications Center dispatchers were wheeling around, typing data into 10 different systems. And it was causing a lot of delayed response and increased operator cognitive load. And so they were excited because we could come in and start to harmonize some of the data across their platforms and reduce the amount of manual data entry that they would have to do. So we were able to demonstrate a prototype with the Air Force, and then again also with Kessel Run with another one of their platforms to do what the Air Force thought was impossible, which was share data digitally between these emergency communication systems. So based off of our work, we were invited to apply to the Installation Resilience Operations Center initiative through another transaction agreement. So this was the first ever OTA authorized by the Air Force Civil Engineering Center. And they used an OTA in order to get a non-traditional contractor into that space because they knew if they relied on their traditional systems integrators, they'd get a similar result to what they had previously, which was just a hodgepodge of different systems that was not really resilient. So they'd like some of the things that we were doing, and they'd like some of the partnerships that we already had going into that award. And so they moved forward with that $9 million prototype. And so some of the key learnings that we had from that experience is that one of the most powerful things you can do is listen to your end user and customer and adapt your solution to meet the needs of their mission. Because you're not going to fully understand the problem as the outsider, and the end user does not have the ability to modify the requirement to really solve their process. So you really act as a conduit of innovation to give that end user access to capability years before they otherwise would be able to get access to it going through the normal process. We also found that another key component of our work was working with recently retired community members that were looking to partner with small businesses. So one of our program managers, Jim D'Amato, retired from the security forces. So by bringing him on board, he could tell us a lot about the inside baseball, who to approach, how to approach them. And that was really helpful because we really had no clue how the government worked until we were able to build a relationship with Jim, and then go through a bunch of meetings and then meet with a bunch of Jim's points of contact. And another key learning that we had was what's really important is technology has to adapt and innovate with the capability that's already in place at an installation. So many proposals are, hey, I'm going to deploy this new thing, or I'm going to go in and rip out what you already have and give you something better. And that usually is not the best path forward. And there's a lot of implementation risk with that approach. And so I think where we were successful is we identified the software that our end users were already using. And then we proposed a solution to integrate with that existing solution to reduce the risk, reduce any kind of training friction and other barriers to adoption. I think our end users really appreciated that approach because they felt like they had control over that innovation process. And it wasn't just someone coming in, throwing a new system at them, which they frequently experience. So we have a couple opportunities to scale the work that we're doing. So I'm currently going through due diligence on an additional TACFI opportunity to expand the scope of the Installation Resilience Operations Center from fire to also include more integrated base defense security system platforms, as well as we're in ongoing conversations with AFCEC to deploy the work that we're doing around the Air Force. And really the goal of that is to create a software agnostic data integration platform for mission support systems. So anybody on an installation can send data to and from this repository of information, and it's in an open government environment where they don't have to pay for additional licensing. There can be a lot of rapid integration and iteration of that ecosystem, and a lot more resiliency in overall operations. So that's all I had.
Yeah, that's awesome, Alex. And I think that's a lot of like very good business advice or sales advice for almost any engagement about listening to the customer. Don't ask them to tear out stuff, and bring a trusted face. Bring a trusted person along. I'm going to move it along to Bill. I believe it's next. Bill Robinson from FTI. Let's listen to. Well, I'll just let it.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy, and Alex. Thanks for that great introduction there on what you're able to do, because I think it sets the example for others. And as Alex pointed out, one of the key organizations that is really invigorating the SBIR program is the AFWorks folks. So the Air Force AFWorks and now Naval X organizations are really invigorating the SBIR program. They're modifying the basic DoD BAA and streamlining the efforts for their services. So FTI, we're kind of old school. We've been doing it for a long time, following some of the original processes, and which obviously has been pretty lengthy. But over the years, we've responded to a lot of the SBIR requirements that are out there, and understand that the SBIR market, if I was to make an assumption here, 90% of the SBIR world is a product or some type of widget, and it solves a niche problem. And most times the requirements that come forth from customers are, they really are struggling to do this, and they're trying to figure out from the world, hey, does anybody have this capability? So the SBIR program is a great way to get your capabilities in front of the government to help the warfighter be a lot more successful. Obviously, if we're talking the DoD. The rest of the federal government's the same thing. They've got a lot of mission needs, and if you've got capabilities to help them, SBIR program is a great way to be able to bring your technology, your capability to the forefront to them. And then using that, what they all struggle with is the contracting capability, right? How do you move faster in a fair acquisition world? And the SBIR program is kind of that exception to the rule sometimes, because it's about your intellectual property, your capability. As Stacy pointed out earlier, one of the directives that I highly recommend companies take a look at is, first of all, the SBA SBIR policy directive, and get a good feel when you read through that, the art of possible. But if you really want to narrow it down, yes, the Air Force SBIR Phase 3 guidebook is good. The most updated one, and I put on here, is the Navy SBIR Phase 3 guidebook. Both of them are great. They'll give you the information. They got a lot of good questions and answers. And it's very helpful for you to take that into your DoD customer and show them that, so they can see, hey, I'm not trying to sell you something that that sounds like snake oil. This is a policy document from your organization. If you didn't know it existed, here's the validation of the true aspects of this program. This is how and why you can get to my company's capability. FTI has been, as I mentioned before, very successful. We've had over 160 SBIR Phase 1 and Phase 2 awards. And a lot of our SBIR technologies have had a lot of investments in them by way of multiple SBIR Phase 2s, meaning what they were referring to before. Let's say I had 15 years ago, I had a SBIR Phase 1 or a Phase 2 award, and I did that with the Marines. I'm able to now pitch that same capability to a Navy customer or an Air Force customer or a DISA customer or whatever, if they are in need of the same like capabilities. And using that capability, they can even decide if they want to go back and work, pitch it through the SBIR program to get another Phase 2, possibly, to take that technology and tweak it to their liking if needed. But if it's already mature and ready to go, guess what? That's the whole beauty of the SBIR Phase 3 program, helping you to commercialize your capability. And when we say commercialize, it's not about shrink wrapping it and putting on the shelves there at Walmart, right? It's about taking that technology, going direct award contract with you, and getting into the hands of actual organizations. That's why it's not SBIR funds, it's organizational funds. So if you're fortunate enough to get a SBIR Phase 1 and then get to a SBIR Phase 2 and prove out your concept, the question is, what do you do from there? What are my other options? And I say, start with your Phase 2 customer today. It may be just one program office within a larger organization. Ask them, is there anybody else in this organization you think that could use this, that you can go talk to them about doing a follow-on Phase two, or maybe doing an enhancement to your phase two and changing and tweaking that code a little bit more to solve another problem somewhere. They may be able to help you get a few more phase twos, which gives you capabilities to even grow more phase threes. But if you're building something that helps the medical community and you pitched it through AFWorks and they helped you find an Air Force medical customer, well, guess what? There are Army medical organizations, Navy medical organizations that can use that same technology. Go over to them, talk to them, and people like Jeff Emmons at the Small Business Office is a great front door for each of these organizations for you to go talk to and let them guide you where in their organization, for sure. But as you saw in an earlier slide, there are 11 federal agencies out there that all have SBIR programs, right? What does that mean? Any federal agency can take advantage of the SBIRs, but there are 11 of them that do it so much that they've established their own program. This is a great place to start. Go talk to those organizations there because they speak phase threes. Now, some of them have you have to understand, they only do phase threes with companies that they've done phase ones and phase twos, and they take them all the way through. They are allowed to go straight to phase threes, just some of them have never seen it done that way. Where FTI has been very successful is we've been able to not take our capabilities and the SBIR technologies we built were not all niche. They've been very generic. We do a lot that helps government customers understand program cost, program readiness, sustainment readiness, life cycle support on the program level. Is your program ready to go? What happens if I do a technology refresh? What would the cost be to maintain this? What's the latest technologies out there to move us to the cloud? So we've been very fortunate to have our technologies become the foundation to help them solve a number of different problems in a lot of different areas. And we're not specific to one department or another. Our cost, let's say some of our analysis of alternative technologies help government customers figure out, well, what if I did this and what if I did that? And we can do that for the medical community, the logistics community, the intelligence community, and so forth, right? So everybody has the same decision-making problems, and we use our technologies to help them. So we've been fortunate not to get ourselves pigeonholed down to one specific area, but I would recommend to you, take a look at your capabilities, and you may be solving that one customer's problem today, but could it be used in this way? And if so, document that. Update your collateral of your one-page capability sheet that I'm sure Jeff will say, hey, when you come to me, give me the down and dirty. Tell me what you can do, and update that. Make sure that it reflects. You've got a SBIR award, and that means I can do sole source contracting. And he can say, oh, if you've got a SBIR technology, tell me about it. And how can you use that capability? Because then he can point you in the right direction as to the right customers that you can take that capability to. So these are the things that I do today as I go into government contracting officers, and I, like Alex, I'm trying to find the end user and see what their problems are, listen to them, and see how I can help them. Sometimes I can't get to those folks, and sometimes I just have to go. I start with a small business office, and then they direct me over to, maybe there's an industry day coming up, maybe there's a particular government office, and I'll talk there. Then I try to educate the contracting officer, because a lot of them don't understand SBIR phase threes, because that's not their normal portfolio of contracting options, right? I want to give them a solution that they have a larger toolbox, and when they do come up with a problem, some of it may be, 8A's program is a great program for them to do. Others are OTAs, other ones are certain IDIQs that the organization uses. I like to give them an option to go, hey, if you can't wait 18 to 24 months, you might want to look at the SBIR phase 3. You find a SBIR company, you may be able to find a sole source capability to get these mission requirements started now, not next year or two. And so
that's
anyway,
that's a good point too, that SBIR phase 3 sometimes is part of the solution, like the vehicle, that sole source capability.
And the last piece of advice I would tell the audience here today is network, network, network. Get out there, go to these sessions here today, understand the market, go to industry days, respond to market analysis requirements, go to the professional associations like AFCEA and where they're doing networking sessions, NDIA. Go to those events and let others folks know what you bring to the table for the federal space.
Also great advice. Thank you so much, Bill, for sharing that. And you brought up Jeff, so let's turn it over now to Jeff for the small business. There we go. Page down. My computer's sleeping. You can
Okay.
start, Jeff. I'll see if I can get my slide to go. Oh, this is not good. Hold on a second. There we go.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stacy. I've been in this position as the director of small business programs here at Hanscom for just 3 years. My predecessor, Bill Donaldson, who I replaced, and I'm going to admit to everybody right now, I knew very little about SBIRs until I came into the position. In my past, we worked a lot with the Rapid Innovation Funds program and such, where we'd go ahead and release our own broad agency announcement and that. Now, I know this is about phase 3, but I have to go back to phase 1 and 2. Ellen McDonald, my deputy, and our role in this. And a lot of this is assisting a new small businesses, non-traditionals, who have not received a government contract before. We're going to go ahead and send them over to what's called a Procurement Technical Assistance Center, which I'm sure some of you have already met with in the past. They help with getting your contracted government entity codes. They help you on writing proposals and giving you some basic market research tools in that. That played a big part in when PEO's Digital, C3INN, and PEO ISR Soft, apologize for all the acronyms there, but we had a pitch day 2 years ago now, a little bit over 2 years ago, and those Procurement Technical Assistance Centers really came in handy because the phone was ringing constantly about people that were interested in getting involved in SBIRs and everything, and we direct them and liaison them over to these Procurement Technical Assistance Centers to get the basic, your basic paperwork out of the way. We're also, Ellen and I are involved a lot with what we used to call Ask Us Anything sessions for some of the other SBIR pitch days that have come up here in the Boston area. At Kessel Run that was mentioned before, they did an Air Force pitch day, as did the Aerospace Management Systems Division and the Force Protection Division did a pitch day over at the Northeastern campus there in Burlington. Now, getting the word out here and that, but we also, as Bill mentioned there, come to us with a capability statement and that, and we'll take a look at it. And we're not a traffic cop, we're a value-added traffic cop here, because we're going to be directing those capability statements to each of the directorates, SBIR points and contact, and their innovation group and that. But we'll also send it down to the division levels, and that if we know of a potential requirement over there. Getting the word out. Ellen and I go ahead and forward to groups like the AFCEA Boston chapter, AFCEA Boston, Lexington and Concord chapter. We send them announcements in that for pitch days, for industry days, and also, hey, there's a SBIR on the street. Also, Hanscom Reps Association, we just send the links just for, and those organizations get that information out to their members and that. Reach back is what I'm talking about there. I've learned a lot in my 3 years in this. I've met with the AFRL folks. I've met with the AFWorks folks and that. And if Ellen or I can't answer a question, we're going to reach back to our counterparts there, the other small business directors. But we've also a lot of senior officials out there in industry now and that who we've met, who were in the small business offices and that. We'd reach out to them. We also, and we may have done some of these folks that are listening in today, some of the MOUs or MOAs that are being put in place there during phase 2 or phase 1. We'll facilitate there with the program offices on base and the companies in getting an MOU or MOA in place. Now going to phase 3 and that. Internally, you won't see this, but Bill mentioned Hanscom's come a long ways in the last 2 years as with small business innovation researchers. Ellen and I both sat in with the training that AFRL provided us and AFWorks provided us on the overall SBIR process. Also, any of our program officers and customers, our program managers, PCOs that want training on phase 3s, I put together a briefing there along with Ellen and the assistance of AFRL to go ahead and sit them down and kind of demystify the process on phase 3s for them. And then also back there in phase 3, if something comes up, the reach back and that, we'll go back to the AFRL or some of these senior officials and that to get their opinions on something or that. And then finally, something you won't see out there, but Ellen and I go through the entire process with the integrated products team, the program managers and PCOs in that, from RFP release all the way to the award of SBIR 3s and that, and providing assistance and such as required. And then finally, this is after you get that first contract and everything else in phase 3. And most of the ones at Hanscom are basic contracts. They're not delivery orders or task orders under any existing schedules out there, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. We have points of contacts at organizations such as General Services Administration, and we can go ahead and refer you to them, and they may have a suggestion on what type of contract vehicle they have available for them, and then you can go ahead and submit a proposal to and get on their schedule, their government-wide agency contract or an IDIQ contract and that. That's good for everyone because after that first award and everything else, and other organizations in the Air Force or the Navy or the Army or the Marine Corps may be interested in something, it's always good to have a contract vehicle in place. And that instead of having them have to do another basic contract, it expedites the process, and also in accordance with the DODI 5000 requirements, there is a preference there to use existing contracts instead of having to issue brand new contracts to everyone. And with that said, the Air Force, we're looking for innovation, we're looking for flexibility, and we're looking for efficiencies, and that is all coming from small business, along with some large businesses too. Stacy, back to you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to be speaking with all those people. And I will add just one more thing. Bill mentions network. From our end, I'm somewhat in charge of market research here or facilitating that and that, but like real estate, it's location. It's market research internally here. We want our PMs, we want our PCOs, we want our engineers out there speaking to people to understand requirements or to understand your capabilities here and such, and what requirements we have. And that requires communication that can occur in a number of different instances or events and such, but we're big on market research because market research is going to drive a good request for proposal, and then it turns into proposal, contract award, and a good contract. So thank you very much. And Stacy, I'll turn it back to you. Over.
So that's good advice, Jeff. Well, thanks for sharing what your office does, but also, yeah, about that market research, and certainly Alex brought up and Bill too, is get in there, network. So people should know that there's pitch days, there's industry days. Pitch days usually apply for it, but there's industry days, which are generally just kind of open to sign up for. There's collider events. Alex mentioned having a consultant that sometimes you hire a human who helps you get in the door and helps you network better. On the interest of time, let's skip and just go right to Q&A. We're not going to do the moderated panel. People in the audience, please submit your Q&A questions. And we are open to extending this a little bit if there's some extra questions. So we'll just go right to Q&A. Liam, does the Q&A go into the Q&A box, or maybe I'll stop sharing?
It's in the chat.
Aha, now I can see the chat. I needed to stop sharing. So,
Hi, Stacy. It looks like you have a Q&A in the Q&A box itself, but it looks like most people have been putting things in the chat.
okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thank you, everybody. And so we might be able to stay a little bit late, like 10 minutes late, if we're trying to get through stuff as much as the panelists and people can stay. Let's see. I did want to ask a question to Bill while I'm looking at questions, which is about budget cycles. They're yearly budget cycles, correct?
Yes, there are. Yeah, the government, they'll start looking at their end of year requirements here in a couple of months as the 1 October starts the new year, and continuing resolutions and trying to get budgets passed and money actually allocated to the organization is always a challenge. So now's a great time to get your capabilities in front of them as they pair together their end of year funding and figure out where they can spend their money.
Excellent. Alex, can you describe how you find DoD sales are different from commercial? You got into it a little bit there.
Sure. I mean, DoD sales are much more about coalition building. So it's really about understanding who your government end users are, and then working backwards to the related customers and vendors, and building a win-win value proposition for that entire coalition. Within the private sector, it's really about helping an executive make a decision for their team. So just when I've done private sector sales, a lot of the work I've done is going to executives and having them send me to their second in commands, and then working with the second in command to build out the support material for the organization to adopt the change, identifying the organizational metrics, and other materials needed to effectively make a decision. So that's still needed on the government side, but what's more important is presenting a future state in the market, at least for substantial phase threes, where all of the existing coalition partners identify where they fit in their new ecosystem. And so an example I'll give you is when we were dealing with Siemens, Trane, and Schneider Electric, they all asked, why should we work with IROC when we have our own platforms that we could sell to the government? And our response was, well, the market is shifting away from proprietary siloed platforms. The government will maintain control over its data infrastructure. Do you want to have a role to play in integrating data from your facilities related control systems? Or do you want to be competing with other people that are coming in with their own open versions of these facilities related control system software packages? And so they said, well, this isn't the market that we thought we were getting into, but we understand how the market is shifting. And so we really understand that by working with IROC and Simplesense, we're contributing to a broader coalition, and we understand where we fit within that coalition.
Perfect. So. Let's see, there's a question here. It's from Henrik Wang. And do phase threes allow for R&D money to be allocated if the solution still needs development for the customization or scaling? Who wants to handle that one? I know the answer.
So Stacy, this is Bill. I can try to, you can take it in a number of different areas. SBIR phase 3 takes all colors of money. So if you get R&D funds or you get O&M funds, any of that can be spent on a SBIR phase 3. So understand that aspect of that. But if your SBIR technology doesn't meet the customer's needs today, then they may, and customers have done that with us. They've actually put funding on our SBIR phase 3 contract to modify some of our technologies to take it to the next level, to be able to do what it is they need to do. So yes, you can use some of those funds to be able to do that.
Yeah, and people should know that there's also after a phase 2, you can also sort of beg for a phase 2B as well, which is really about just, and I see Cheryl nodding, like just sort of talk to your PM, be like, we're not quite done, give us a little more money. But yes, phase 3 is very open about what you can spend on. I'm going to send a question to Stefan.
Can I just jump in, Stacy?
Yeah.
So a key differentiator for phase 3s are supplemental following contracts for AFWERX. So like if you're looking at a TACFI or StratFi, the color of money is super important. So using 3,800 money is pretty difficult. And so, I mean, AFWERX asked for 3,600 money, which is sometimes challenging for organizations to find. And I think it's still to be determined if they can take 3080 money. So while you're doing your phase 3 negotiations, you just really want to take into account the color of money that your organization can provide and that you're allocating work in a way that matches that color of money.
Yeah, and just to clarify what Alex is saying, AFWERX is Air Force, so Navy and Army have a little bit different rules. They don't do TACFI and StratFi. TACFI and StratFi are sort of like 2Bs. We don't have time to get into all that today. I wanted to, I wanted to ping Stefan, who's been sitting here quietly, because he often brings up this issue of like requirements and how you can use almost like requirements as a way to like, well, you explain it, Stefan.
Sure. So within phase 3s, it depends what kind of requirements you're dealing with, right? So in a lot of times we're having discussions, as Bill Robinson, Jeff Emmons, and others have spoken about, it's about networking. Understanding where the program is today and understanding what kind of capability gaps or areas that could be improved over time. In some cases, if it's a new start, how do you help shape the program? If it's something that's currently a legacy system or an active system that's fielded, if there's a modernization that's coming out, how can you leverage the technology to help modernize the system or achieve some sort of, or address some sort of gap analysis or gap that's currently within that technology to move the system forward from a capability standpoint. So those are the types of things where phase 3s can play in based on phase 1s and phase 2 technologies. It just depends on where I would recommend people asking where they are with that system itself, and then starting to ask those questions of, well, where would you like to migrate to? Are you looking at decisions, making it more analytical decisions? Are you looking at making things faster? Are you looking at migrating things into the cloud? Are you looking at hardening the system? And there is different tools and technologies that you can use to make that happen.
I'll just go ahead and add to that too, Stefan. Yeah, it depends on the requirement in that. And R&D can be used in some cases. 3080 is the Air Force version of production funds or sustainment funds. And it all depends on the requirement. And are we modernizing something, or are we just refreshing through a sustainment effort? But software is, if we're buying software and such, that's primarily, or you're developing software for the government, I said, excuse me, we're talking 30, we're talking 3,600 there, which is R&D funding and that, or if you're going in to do fixes or something, or to add something, but that determination will be made by the contracting officer with what type of funds and such. And we do have flexibility there. Even after we receive our Appropriation Act and we receive funding, we are allowed to reprogram funds too, below threshold reprogramming without having to go back to Congress and the committees there. So there's a lot of flexibility, but those MOUs and MOAs that we're getting in place, and as Stacy mentioned there, you know, we'll have the money, or they will have the money. I'm not in that business anymore. Before they release a solicitation to you. And just for everybody out there, the Air Force, before we release a solicitation and require small businesses to put together, a proposal, which costs you money and time, we'll have either a reasonable expectation of funding, i.e. it's in the budget, or the contracting officer will have it in his or her hand before we release the RFP, because we don't like a lot of starts and stops. Over.
Yeah, that's excellent. And there's a question here about phase 3 program advocate. It's from Richard Taylor, but also I think buried in there is sort of a question about you all find, and maybe Jeff, you help people find like program offices. So how do you find like a shepherd or a program at like a phase 3 advocate, or how do you connect with the right program office? A program like Alex found, and really a great story, Alex, of fits and starts and finding the right program. Bill, your company is like really good at finding programs.
So Stacy,
Yeah, go ahead.
I can take this one if you want. We were really successful going to the AFWorks Collider events, and then really showing a lot of passion and talking to everyone that was related to the domain that we were in. And we actually made our first connections through an AFRL research scientist that had been working with the fire chief on a specific problem. It really resonated with our messaging. So, as Bill said, just network, and keep growing your connections of Air Force contacts, and keep trying to find who that best end user or customer should be based off of the problem you're trying to solve.
I think
that's a lot better than what I see a lot of companies do, which is they look up this directory of all the program offices and read the descriptions and try to call people within these program offices. I think that's a fast way to have a conversation, but I'm not sure how effective that is if you don't go in representing a solution to problems that end users have, and you can convincingly tell a program manager a story about why you should have a shot at solving that problem.
Right, and Army has X-Tech Search, and Navy has Naval X events, and their 401 tech bridges. So you're saying it's better to go to these more specific events for this type of
and there are a lot of events going on about problems within the Department of Defense, and so you should try to get engaged with that community as early as you can.
I know there's Vulcan, there's tons and stuff, and people should sign up for all their email lists too, because all of these groups, SoftWorks and AFWorks and Naval X and Tech Bridges and X-Tech Start, they all have email lists, so that's a good place to start.
And just one more thing, and not every channel will be the best for the problem you're trying to solve, but your goal as a company is to quickly test all of the different channels that are out there and identify that tight-knit community that's right for you, and continue to go to those kinds of events. So you're not going to go to every single DoD event out there, but you're going to rapidly figure out where your crowd is, so to speak.
That's fair. So, but to Richard Taylor asked a very specific point about, are there phase 3 program advocates? Would you say you are one, Jeff?
Yeah, I would say, I'm definitely an advocate in that. And as Alex mentioned, there's a number of different ways of doing this. If you go talk to AFWorks, and that they know the portfolios up here at Hanscom Air Force Base and all 3 PEOs. So we get a lot of referrals that way. We'll also get referrals from other acquisition centers across the Air Force and that. So as Bill mentioned, capability statement, bring that into us, and that send it to us by email or however you want to send it. And then we're going to take that and we're going to turn that around and send it to the PEOs, Program Executive Officers, SBIR POCs. If we know of a division, where requirements we don't report to anybody here at Hanscom, so we can go to the PEOs or we can go to the division at the PEO contacts, but we'll make sure that the PEOs have it to their specific individuals in that. But that said, it's networking, it's getting out there and that. I will just share 3 weeks ago, the AFCIO was approached by a small business and such, and that package was forwarded to Ellen and I, and we followed just the procedures I was talking about. We had discussions with this individual. He showed us a demo of it, of his product, of his innovation, and that we forwarded it on to the PEO's SBIR points of contact, the innovation group. But we also knew that the folks down in San Antonio at the Cyber and Crypto Logic Center down there, which reports back here to Hanscom, may be interested in it. So we forwarded it down to them. And then he was able to talk to those individuals and such, and explain his product and that. And his company now has received the SBIR 1 award just about 2 weeks ago. Over.
That's a great story. There's a question here also from Richard Taylor that's a little more technical on the contract side, either to Cheryl or Jeff. Is there any language in the FAR that gives guidance? So if you guys don't know what the federal acquisition requirements are, now that's what FAR is, that gives guidance to sole source 8As or SDVOSBs as phase 3s for similar business concerns? Can 8A or SDVOSB serve as a phase 3? And how do we market that?
I'll go ahead and take that. I'm very familiar with the Section 8A program. We did over 40 actions last year. But as far as SBIRs and that, in phase 1 or 2, if it's competed, then we can go sole source on phase 3 and such. And I am going to have to look it up whether we can apply the 8A sole source rules or the service disabled veteran-owned small business rules to phase 3s and such. But we do a number of sole source actions to 8A native-owned Hawaiian, Alaskan, and tribally owned businesses and such. But what opens the door the most of all, as Bill and Alex mentioned, is if you compete phase 1 or 2, we do not have to compete a phase 3. We're more or less grandfathered in. Yeah, it's negotiated and such, but we do get credit under competition because it derived from a phase 1 or 2 competition. So our program executive officers get credit there to put it in the competitive side versus non-competitive side. Over.
Just to add, if I could, just to quickly add on Jeff, yeah, he covered all of that. But FAR Part 6 does give you the listing of the sole source type requirements, and there is several lists on there. And under FAR 6302.5 is either the authority or statute requirements that dictate to the government agencies what they can and cannot do in a sole source environment. But I've just mentioned the phase 3s are mandated as follow-ons. But one of the things I want to caution, because I thought there was a question I saw pop up about the age. If something was, I think it was 10 years ago, they had a phase 1 or phase 2 and there was no follow-on. I said, you have to be careful with that, because even though we can probably try to resurrect something like that, the government's going to look at the latest technology. And if it's outdated, chances are they'll probably go through doing some of their market research. And I said, Bill and Alex may have more FaceTime with that. I said, but they are going to look at to see if it's still relevant and if it's in their portfolio as far as what they need and want to use. So just something to be cautious about, that even though we're sitting there saying that it is a sole source, that we do, and it's mandated that we can go direct for the awards, there are times that there are some hiccups in that process.
So it can be 7 years old. In this case, they're asking at a SBIR that's 7 years old. It can be, but you're just saying in practice, sometimes you wind up just being sniped by more modernized technology.
Yeah, if I could just answer, it was FAR 630. FAR 6.3 is the sole source criteria that lists all of the areas that the government can use to justify a sole source.
Yeah,
so it's FAR
Cheryl,
6.3.
Yeah, copy that. Yeah, and we cite the -5 reference there. We have the PCO. We recommended the PCO and the team to cite the -5 reference there to the exception to Competition and Contracting Act. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, Stacy, this is Bill. So on that same point, understand for those that are on the line, if you're a non-traditional government contracting, you're looking at the socioeconomic statuses like women-owned small business, service disabled, and so forth, right? To help take the giant pool down a little bit more, right? And when you're marketing your company to folks like Jeff and others in the government, and you're showcasing, I've got these capabilities, this is great. There are other companies that have those same capabilities. Okay, good. Why you? Well, I am women-owned small business, and that perks their ears up because they got socioeconomic goals in the government because of fair acquisition. They're setting aside a certain portion of that money to meet these socioeconomic goals. So if your company has that, great. Just understand that of those socioeconomic goals, one of the programs, the 8A program, has the capability of direct awards at certain levels. And if you're an 8A, you want to read up on the Small Business Act in the 8A Section 8 that tells you a little bit more about that. So you understand that. Obviously, you're probably going through the PTAC and getting trained on all that stuff. But what kind of trumps a lot of that is the SBIR program, that if you've got a SBIR Phase 1 award, just understand, just that one in itself helps you get to Phase 3, because it's, if there's a customer that wants your capability, they can go direct award, sole source to you. Doesn't matter if you're an 8A, a woman-owned, or service disabled. This is about you getting that direct award contract.
SBIR is even more powerful than 8A.
It can be, and that's why it's worth you to stay the course. If you've got a capability and you're going through the SBIR program, to be able to take that capability and market it, because now you don't have to compete in that woman-owned small business or service disabled or all those competitive IDIQs. The government can come directly to you today, not putting you in a lump of others to go compete for that. But I would say at the same time, go talk to those other primes that really have the capability of bidding on those and winning the IDIQs and going to prime in those areas. Let them know about your capabilities, team together, because you become a discriminator for them to get more contracts, and you're able to grow not only in the sole source, but in the competitive world too. There's value in that.
Yeah, and my understanding is, in terms of goals, sometimes they have goals like women-owned or minority-owned or service disabled, but there's also goals in general to have a non-traditional on some of these larger contracts, say at a Raytheon or I think I mentioned Lockheed earlier. And my understanding is that you can do SBIR Phase 3 through one of their contracts if you're filling a requirement. So everyone understand that the program offices set the requirements for the program, right? And requirements sort of define what their goals are, what's allowable and what they're allowed to spend on. So if it's serving a requirement, that they will actually, Cheryl, were you telling me this? They'll plus up some of those existing contracts because they go, oh, it's serving a need to have a non-traditional. So the prime wins and the government wins because they're getting a problem solved. They can sole source it. So it's another, one of the things you all are hearing is like, one of the problems that you're solving is, besides a technical problem, is sort of a contracting ease. So is that true that they can plus up existing contracts in order to take on board a small company?
Yeah, was that directed at me? Yes. I say yes. Technically, the government can do whatever they want. I said, so yes, if they, we always carry that big stick. I said, yes, as long as they can justify it and as long as, they have the funding. And keep in mind, the way the government works is, I'm sure, well, definitely within the Army, but I think it's pretty much across the board. When we were talking earlier, I said, if it's not already budgeted in their lines, they will look to steal from other programs. So there is that sensitivity, and they go through program and budget reviews on a regular basis. And if one group hasn't met some of their obligations or expenditure criteria yet, if they're under, then they're at risk of losing some of their money. And if someone has projected something over, that's when they start to, borrow from each other.
Yeah. So Stacy, this Bill, if I can add to that, if you look inside of the SBA guidance on the SBIR program, there is a section there that talks about if government prime contractors can do SBIR Phase 3 awards. And I think that's really where you're referring to. And there is an encouragement at certain levels. I forget if it's a $250 million or an ACAT 1 program or something like that. Those primes are encouraged to use SBIR technologies on their contracts. So that's how you can go point out to Raytheon, hey, on your big contract with US Space Force, you should be using this, and I've got a capability that can help in this area. You may find yourself walking in the door and immediately getting work because they're like, you know what, you're right. We're struggling and we want to be able to showcase to the government we've met these requirements and we've overlooked that, or, whatever the case is. So there's a chance that they could get plussed up to automatically down direct some work without taking work share away from anybody else, or all their other subcontracts, to be able to get that SBIR contracting or that SBIR technology integrated within that program. And so they'll plus it up and then they'll do a down directed SBIR phase 3 subcontract to that company. So
yes, that's exactly it. It's very interesting. And it's important, I think, to some of the listeners, because I think your company, Bill, and Alex's company, you guys have standalone technology that you're building and selling directly to the government. But some people need their stuff integrated. It'd be part of a missile, or it'd be part of a aircraft wing, or it'd be, so some people need their stuff integrated. And that's why it's important to know that phase 3 still works great if you need an integrator. There's a question from Jules Theory. Could you share your experience with climbing TRL levels, contract phases 1, 2, and 3, and raising private capital? Thanks. So I have a little experience about climbing TRL levels. It was hot and sweaty, it took us about 4 years of hot and sweaty work. But we got there. But I didn't take, and that was through 3 programs, phases 1 and 2. So it was about $4 million or 6 or something like that. It's hard to do it all in one program. Does anyone else want to share a story, Alex or Bill, about climbing TRL levels?
Yeah, we were really successful with that adapt and integrate approach because we were relying on integrating with systems that had a very high TRL level. So it reduced our requirement to prove capability to the government. So that's really how we were the most successful. But I would say in general, the TRL level process is really hard. Changing the TRL process, our capability of your technology is hard because you're transitioning from scientists to end users and program offices, and those just are really fundamentally different people with different expectations on technology. So you just have to be really careful as you're doing that. So Stacy, I do have only a couple more minutes left, and then I have to jump back into my day.
Yeah, thanks everybody for staying late. We can wrap it up. There's some good questions here, but when we talked about putting this webinar together, we're like, this is really a 2-day seminar because there's so much detail to phase 3 and everyone's company is so different. So I think we'll try it again next year in a different format, but thank you, Alex. If you have to drop, thank you for sharing. We'll probably be wrapping this up in 1 minute and let everybody get back to their workday. And people are welcome to follow up with me on my email. You can find me on LinkedIn. Jeff, there was a request for your email. If you can type it into the chat.
Yeah, that's on the slides. And I think I also saw that people would like to have the slides if that's available, or I can type. I'm on my iPhone. I don't have chat right now. So. Okay,
so we'll issue the slides and you'll have everyone's emails, and feel free to follow up with any of us. And there'll also be the video recording we usually post on our website, northstarcampus.org. Maybe we'll just break there. I have so many more questions. There's some more here, but it's been an hour and 15. So thank you all for coming. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions. Oh boy, platform 1 question. Okay, thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Take care.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.